Today's daf we're going to be learning is Yevamot Daf Lamed. Today's daf is sponsored by Bernie and Susanna Goldstein in gratitude for their family recovering from COVID. Lulei Toratcha Shashuai Az Avadti Boni. Daf Yomi during the pandemic has been a real source of strength. Thank you, Rabbanit Michelle and the Hadran team for making it accessible. Okay, we're going to start with a quick review of yesterday's daf and finish up yesterday's daf. We had a whole discussion about Rabbi Elazar in terms of understanding the opinion of Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai hold Ma'amar Koneh, whereas the Beit Shammai, right, Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Gamol, which we said Rabbi Elazar doesn't hold that way. We said in the end, Rabbi Elazar, and we tried to say maybe it's very weak. No, we said in the end, Beit Shammai holds Ma'amar according to Rabbi Elazar is this in between, that Ma'amar is Koneh enough to basically say she's going to be forbidden, right? She knocks out the sister. That was the Mishnah. So Shachim, three brothers married to two sisters. Two of them are married to sisters. One is not married at all. Mate Echa mi Baalei Achayot, and then the third brother who's not married to anyone does Ma'amar. But once he does Ma'amar, what happens? The sister falls to Yibum, remember? So we said, in that case, because he did Ma'amar, Beit Shammai holds, he gets to stay with the one who he did Ma'amar with. Right? Whereas Beit Hillel says, no, that's not good enough. He basically has Zika of two sisters. He has to divorce them both, basically, or get rid of each one in their own way. But the point is, right? So Rabbi Elazar says, when Beit Shammai says Ma'amar is Koneh, what it means is it's enough to basically say you can stay with this woman and knock out your other sister. Okay, and she's out of the picture, but you can stay married to the first one. Then we brought this question of Rabbah. Is Nisuin Ose Erusin or not, according to Beit Shammai, right? Do we say, is it Nisuin Ose or Erusin Ose? Rabbah was trying to figure out, is it like Nisuin? Is it like Erusin? Right? And then we tried to figure out, well, what does his question mean? Does it mean you need Mesirah Lechuppah, right? In the end, we said his question is really, once you do this track of Ma'amar, you want a different track. And then you basically, I want to say it in a little bit different words than yesterday, you basically go into the Nisuin track. Ma'amar is like Kiddushin to the extent, not only is it like Kiddushin, but it's as if now you're on a marriage track and not a Yibum track. And then you have to do all the things that marriage tracks have and not Yibum tracks, right? It's another way of saying it in a bit of a different way than I said yesterday. Then we tried to prove it from this case of this, Rabbi Elazar says Yafer. We said, maybe Yafer means, right, it doesn't necessarily prove that it's Nisuin, because Yafer could be Mayfair with the father, which would be like Erusin, once you're engaged, right? You can be Mayfair only with the father. Maybe it means that. Then we went, and then this was all, in order to explain this, they said, Rabbi Ami said, Hachaba Mayaskina, Kigon de Abi Ba'ma'amal, Ubeit Shammai de Amar Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Gamul. Right? When we tried to explain his opinion, we said in the end, Rabbi Eliezer in that Braita or Mishnah, I think it is, basically goes by Beit Shammai, who says Ma'amar is Koneh Kinyan Gamul. And that's why Yafer. That was another way of reading it, right? And then we said, well, only Mayfair, though, with Shutfut, but it's according to those who say it's a case where he did Ma'amar, and it's according to Beit Shammai, who says Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Gamul. Now comes the Gemara, and they want to reconcile that with Rabbi Elazar. Because what did Rabbi Elazar say? The Beit Shammai doesn't say Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Gamul, right? It's not Koneh Kinyan Gamul. It's just, what does it do? It only allows you to get rid of the sister, but you can stay married to her, which means it has nothing to do with Hafarat Nedarim. We're now outside of Rabbah's question. We're just taking that source and Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, saying, how is it reconciled with Rabbi Elazar? And that's what we're going to say right now. So about 7 lines from the bottom. Ela Rabbi Elazar de Amar Ma'amar Koneh Kinyan Eno Koneh Ela Litchot Litzara Bilvat. If you hold that even according to Beit Shammai, Ma'amar is enough just to say you could stay married to this sister, but not the other one, right? You could get the other one can leave the picture, and it's not like you can't marry either one of them. But Amai Mefer B'Shutafut. How does Ma'amar give you the power to be made for her Nadarim, even with the father? In other words, Ma'amar is not that strong. It only does that one thing, according to Rabbi Elazar. That was his whole theory. If you say it's Koneh Kinyan Gamul, then you basically say it's like Kiddushin Doraita, right, which would allow you to be made fair with the father. But if you say Ma'amar is only allowing you this one thing, then it won't help you. So comes Amar Lecha Rabbi Elazar, when I said that, don't take me literally. When I said Ma'amar only does this, don't take my only so seriously. Okay, what he said is, it's Rabbi Elazar isn't speaking here. We're putting words in his mouth. They're saying Rabbi Elazar could have said, I was focusing in on that specific issue. I wasn't saying it only has this power entirely. I wasn't talking about vows. What I was trying to say when I said it only permits the tzara, meaning the sister, to be basically right. Basically, it pushes out the sister to the extent that you can stay married to this sister. What I was trying to say is it only does that. And what doesn't it do? It doesn't mean you're married to her, which means if you're not married to her, it means that if you decide you don't want to, in the end, do yibum with her, what do you need? We've learned this already before. If you did ma'amar, you need a get from the ma'amar, and you also need chalitza. What I was trying to say is, don't think you're on a full marriage track that now you don't even need chalitza. You just need a get. A get will exempt her entirely, will disconnect you entirely. No, you still need chalitza. That's what I meant when I said it only does this. It only does this, meaning you still need to do chalitza. But I wasn't talking about a farat nedarim. Of course, there's other ramifications of ma'amar. For example, you can now be made for a nedarim with her father. Okay? So now they say, the ibait ema, or an alternative explanation would be to say, Amar lecha Rabbi Elazar, he could say like this. How do we explain this yafer? So before now, we said yafer, clearly he can't be made for the nedarim by himself because he's not fully married to her, right? It must be b'shutafut, which is what Rav Nachman said. But now he's going to say, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who explained it that way, minicha. He actually doesn't make any sense because miktane yaferu. It doesn't say they can annul her vows in plural, meaning both of them. Yafer katane. It says yafer, which makes it sound like he could definitely do it. Now we're stuck because whatever we say according to Rav Nachman, why could he be yafer? Right? If you say yafer, or even not according to Rav Nachman, right? You could say yafer in what way? You could say, well, ma'amar koneh kinyan gamor, according to Beit Shammai, and that's why he has the power. Comes the Gemara to answer Rabbi Elazar a second way to say, no. He really can be made fair them 100%. Now, ma'amar is not sufficient to allow that. So there must be something else missing from the story. And this is what we call an ukimta. It wasn't just ma'amar. There was more than ma'amar here. And then that will resolve the question against Rabbi Elazar. If you say ma'amar is in koneh entirely, why did you say it works here? Why does it work here? Because of some other issue. It's ma'amar with something else. What was it? What is it? Now, this is, by the way, it's not even ma'amar. Okay, we said before, the answer Rabbi Ami gave was ma'amal, and it's Beit Shammai who says ma'amar koneh kinyan gamor, and we said that didn't work with Rabbi Elazar. So how do we resolve it? We get rid of the answer of ma'amar. It wasn't ma'amal. What was it? She fell to yibum to the brother, and he didn't take care of yibum, and she took him to court, and she said, "Hello, you need to take care of yibum. You didn't do it." So what happened? The court said, because now, remember, yibum is partly financial. He gets the brother's inheritance, basically so that he could support the wife. Now, she's got no one supporting her. So she goes and she says, listen, you got to do yibum where you got to support me. So the Beit Din said, you have to give her food. You have to give her money for food. Now, okay, so what does that do? Well, so now he doesn't do yibum, but the court appointed him in charge of her mizona. And now we're going to have to go according to Rav Pinchas Mishmei de Rava. That's going to be our explanation according to what he said. Anyone who makes a vow does it al dat ba'ala, meaning when you make a vow, your husband has the right. Now here it doesn't say so, but what they mean is, or whoever's in charge of your financial, right? This shows, by the way, the marriage to them was a financial arrangement. Because here, he's not even married to her, and yet he has the power of the husband because she's financially dependent on him. So now that's a different way of answering it. This has nothing to do with ma'amal. It wasn't ma'amal. That's right. That was one answer they gave before when they didn't understand how we could have the power. It must be he did ma'amal. Now they say it wasn't even ma'amal. And by the way, it was Beit Shammai. No, because Rabbi Elazar doesn't think Beit Shammai will be koneh kinyan gamur. Again, one option was to say, it is enough. And when he said it's only dochelet tzara, he didn't mean only that. He meant only that and some other things. But Here we say it wasn't ma'amar at all, and then has no contradiction at all to Rabbi Elazar, and we can resolve it that way. Okay, new Mishnah. Shlosha achim. Okay, I forgot 1 second to get my share screen ready. So 1 minute. Open it. Okay, so now we have a lot of pictures. We're going to have a lot of cases, a lot of Mishnayot today. And the Mishnayot are going to basically be on all sorts of cases of 3 brothers. Oh, why is this not working? 1 second. Okay. 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and 1 non-sister. Okay. And they're all married, right? Each one's married to each one. And we're going to have a whole bunch of permutations. So our people today are Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And then we have Yael and Chana, who are sisters. And Shula, who's called Shula because eventually she's going to become a tzara, is the one who's married to Levi. So right now she's not a second wife. Each one just has 1 wife. Yael and Reuven are married. Shimon and Chana are married. And Levi and Shula are married. So now here's our situation. So 3 brothers, 2 married, 2 sisters, and 1 married to Nochrit. Remember, it doesn't mean a Gentile woman. It means, which, in other places it means, but Nochrit here means she's not related to the other 2. We're going to have a whole bunch of different options here. So in the first story, Reuven dies first. Now, what does that mean? The Nasoy Nochrit Levi, who's married to the non-related woman, does Yibum with Yael. Obviously, she doesn't do Yibum with Shimon because Shimon's married to her sister. And then what happens? Levi dies. Now, at this point, you can tell me the halacha, what's going to be. Yael's going to fall to Yibum to Shimon. Shimon's married to her sister Chana, so that's not going to be good. So Yael is going to be P'turah, and Shula is going to be P'turah because she's the tzara of the Erva. This is a classic case we could have learned from the first Mishnah. So Harishona Yotza Mishum Achot Isha. The first one is exempt because of Achot Isha, and Shnia and her tzara Mishum tzarata. But Asaba Ma'amal. What if Levi didn't actually do Yibum with Yael, but he just did Ma'amal? Now we're in this in between because is Shula the tzara of Yael or not? There was only Ma'amar between them. So now they say, Asaba Ma'amar, and then mate Levi. So if Levi does Ma'amar with Yael, and then he dies, Nochrid, now obviously Yael is exempt from Yibum because she falls to Yibum to Shimon, and Shimon she can't marry, but because he's married to her sister. But Shula is not really a tzara here. And that's why she has to do chalitza, because she's maybe a tzara, maybe not, right? Ma'amar is this in-between stage. So basically, we don't allow her to do Yibum, but she does have to do Chalitza. Okay, we also don't say she's exempt like the previous case. So the Gemara points out, and you have to remember this inference for later in today's daf. I know it's not going to be so easy because we have a lot of cases, but try to remember this inference. Ta'ama da'avid ba'ma'amal. So what they infer from this Mishnah is specifically when she does ma'amal, that's when Shula does Chalitza. But ha lo avid ba'ma'amal. What if he didn't do Ma'amar? Okay, let's say Yael just fell to Yibum to Levi, but he didn't actually marry her or do Ma'amar or anything. And then what would we say? Well, normally we say if we hold Zika, there's Zika between Levi and Yael, which would already mean that Shula again is in this in-between stage. But the Mishnah didn't bring that case. So that means that the Mishnah thinks only if he did Ma'amal is Shula considered a potential tzara of Yael and she can't do Yibum. But halo avid b'ma'amal. But if there wasn't ma'amal, nochri ibum enami miyama, the Shula could actually do Yibum. In which case, Rav Nachman zot omeret ein zika afilu b'chad acha. Notice there's only one potential brother here, and Yael clearly has Zika to him. But this Mishnah clearly holds there's no Zika, because if the Mishnah held there was Zika, Yael would be already considered somewhat committed to Levi, which means that Shula would be a potential tzara. It wouldn't be enough to exempt her, but it would be enough to say you can't do Yibum, you do Chalitza. The fact that they didn't say that shows we must hold there's no Zika. Okay, so that's Rav Nachman's conclusion. Why do we have to remember this for later? Because later we're going to have to reinterpret this Mishnah and say it's even if you didn't do Yibum, because even if you didn't do Ma'amal, even the earlier stage would have made Shula somewhat considered there is Zika because, and we're going to have to explain it some other way, because Rav Ashi is going to infer from a different Mishnah that there is Zika. And then we're going to say, well, how does Rav Ashi deal with our Mishnah? And we're going to have to come up with an explanation. And then we're going to have to explain how does Rav Nachman deal with the other Mishnah, which seems to imply Yesh Zika. So basically, the thing to remember right now is Rav Nachman says it's clear from here that there's no Zika, because if there was, it wouldn't need to be a case of ma'amal. It would have been even just she felt a yibum. That would have been enough to make Shula a potential tzara of an erva, which would then say she can't do yibum. Next case. So 3 brothers, 2 were married. Same thing. Okay, we don't really need to go through this again. But now, instead of, in our first case, who died, right? First Reuven died. In this case, first Levi dies. Then Reuven marries Shula, does yibum with her, because she falls to yibum to eat. She can do yibum with either one. Happens to be Reuven does it in our case. And then Vamet, then Reuven dies. Now at this point, obviously, right, it's again the case of Yael and Shula fall to yibum to Shimon. Yael can't marry Shimon because he's married to her sister. That's Erva. And Shula's the tzara. So again, Arishona yotzeit mishum achot isha, right? She's the sister of his wife. Ushniya mishum tzarata. Okay, same thing. And now the exact same thing as before. Asaba ma'amal vamet. What if Reuven, after Levi dies, Reuven does ma'amal with Shula? So now, according to the last mission, we already know what to say here, right? Vamet. Nochrit choletzev v'lo mityabemet. Again, because it was ma'amal, so there was some connection between them, which means Yael and Shula, again, are at least enough to be considered tzarot, to basically say Shula can't do yibum with Shimon. But it's not enough to say, right, it's this in-between that she's exempt. Okay, so now, Hatulamali, Hainuhach. Gemara asked the obvious question. We already easily could have understood this case from the previous case. So why, right? It was pretty easy to go through this. We already knew it. What's the difference between the two cases? So they say, the difference is who's at the center? Who's the main wife? Okay, in the first case, it was Levi's wives who fall to Yibum, right? And who was Levi's main wife? Levi's main wife was the one who wasn't related. And in our case, the main wife is Yael, who is related, right? She's the one who's his main wife. The one who we're not sure is really his wife is the tzara. So now they're going to say the following. Hashta umahatam. In the first case, and this is the question of the Gemara, we really don't need our Mishnah. Why? In the previous case, achot isha havya tzara lenochrit, right? It's the sister who's the tzara to the nochrit, right? Normally we call the nochrit Shula, the tzara. But really, it's Shula was the main wife, and she became the extra wife. And the whole question is, right, is she the wife or not? And yet, Amar Nochrit Asura, that was enough to make Shula, the main wife, not allowed to do Yibum. Even though you might say, look, Levi was married to Shula. We don't know if he's married to the sister. Maybe we should just let Shula do Yibum. But in that case, we don't even allow Shula to do Yibum. So therefore, you're going to say, right, in our case, in our case, when Reuven was married to Yael, and Yael for sure can't do Yibum, what, you think you're going to allow Yibum with Shula? Of course you won't. In other words, this second Mishnah was totally unnecessary. You really could have easily learned it from the previous. So they have to come up with a creative explanation in order to understand why they had our Mishnah. So they said the following. Tana haf Tana Beresha. First, they learned our Mishnah. They taught our Mishnah, which is, right, since Yael is the main wife, and she falls to Yibum and she can't do it, right? She's exempt, actually. Well, Shula is only maybe married, maybe not married to Reuven, right? She's got Zika, she's got Ma'amal, whatever, right? Whatever. Let's assume not Zika. It's just because she did Ma'amal. We're going to basically not allow her to do Yibum because the whole main case is based on an Erva case because the main wife is an Erva. But then the Tana thought that the previous Mishnah was actually permitted to do Yibum because they said, look, Shula is the main wife, right? The tzara, right? The extra wife who isn't yet an extra wife. She's only done Ma'amal. She's Erva, but she's so secondary here. Maybe Shula can actually do Yibum in that case. So therefore, the Tana, the Mishnah thought originally that maybe she could do Yibum. Then what happened? But then he thought about it more and he said, no. Ma'amar is sufficient to basically make her a tzarat erva and basically not allow her to do yibum, right? It still makes her, she does chalitza, but he figured out after he was learning it that really the first Mishnah should be forbidden. So why were both mentioned? Now we say because, first of all, and not only why were both mentioned, why did that one come first? So they first explain why it came first. We've seen this before, that the rabbis like things that they come up with on their own. So because he figured out on his own that, oh, wait, that's forbidden, he put that one first because he liked it better, because it was the halach. He figured it out on his own. So that's why he put that first Mishnah. And really, our Mishnah wasn't necessary to put. But since our Mishnah was there originally, because he taught it before we had the first Mishnah, right? He thought the first Mishnah was going to be mutar. He thought this was going to be asul. So Mishnah lo zazamim koma. Once he wrote this Mishnah and put it in, well, we left it in. Okay? So again, the order is, our Mishnah was learned first to say she can't do Yibum. He thought that she could do Yibum in the previous case because Shula was the main woman there, and it's only just a doubt whether the Erva was married or not. But then he realized, no, even then you can't. So he put that Mishnah in first because he liked that better, because he learned it. And then he kept our Mishnah because our Mishnah was already there. But really, our Mishnah is not necessary. Okay. Next case. Shlosha achim. Okay, now we get back to our pictures. We have 3 brothers. Just finish this. Okay, 3 brothers again. Same people. Reuven married to Yael, Shimon married to Chana, Levi married to Shua. Shnayim mehem nisuin shtei achayot, ve'echad nasuin achui. That's what I just said. Now, meit echa mi ba'alei achayot. Okay, one of them married to the sisters dies, so Reuven dies. Kanas nasuin achrit et ishto. Okay, so now what happens? Yael does Yibum with Levi. This is like the first case, okay? But obviously there's going to be a difference. Umeta ishto shel sheni. Now what happens? Chana dies, okay? Shimon's wife. So now, okay, Yael's happily married to Levi with Shula, okay? Or we don't know happily married, but let's assume Yael and Shula are happily married to Levi when Chana dies. Now, why is this important? Because achar kach meit nasuin achrit. If Levi then dies, now Yael and Shula fall to Yibum to Shimon. Now Shimon is no longer married to Chana. So what would we say? Normally, she can marry someone who her sister was married to, but she died. Remember, the whole thing is b'chayeha, only when Chana is alive. However, okay, that means Yael cannot marry him. Okay, so if we go further, what do we see? Not only can Yael not marry Shimon, also Shula cannot marry Shimon. Basically, they're going to be prohibited from marrying him, which basically means they can go marry whoever they want. There's no need for Yibum. But what's the issue here? So let's go look back at when Reuven died and Yael fell to Yibum to, right? When Reuven died, Yael falls to Yibum to Shimon and Levi. She falls to Yibum twice. The first time she falls to Yibum, Shimon's still married to her sister. Since the first time she fell to Yibum, Shimon was married to her sister, she can never marry Shimon. Okay? So therefore, even if when her new husband, Levi, dies, her sister's already no longer alive, it doesn't permit her. Because that's what it says. So since the first time she fell to Yibum to Shimon, she couldn't marry him. She's never allowed to marry him. This goes back to Isur Eshet Ach comes into play, and it's there. So now comes Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and he says the following, which seems to be just explaining the Mishnah, but the Gemara has a bit of an issue with that, and we'll see in a minute. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Kol Yevama she'en ani koreh ba b'shat nefila Yevama yavo aleha harei ke'eshet ach sheyesh la banim ba'asura. Any Yevama who I can't say when she falls to Yibum, Yevama yavo aleha, right? That he can't do Yibum with her because she was married to her sister. She is like Eshet Ach sheyesh la banim ba'asura. She will be forever forbidden to him. He becomes like a brother to her when, right, the brother of her husband, when her husband has children, right? It's as if her husband died with children, meaning she can never marry him. So now, my kamashbalan, why did Rav have to say this? Tanina, that's exactly what our Mishnah says. We don't need Rav to tell you this when our Mishnah says explicitly that. So what are you adding, Rav, to what that said? So they say, well, ma'u detema, hanimile hecha deloi chazila benefila rishona, aval hecha yichazila benefila rishona ema tishtere kamashmana. What does this mean? What we talked about before, and I'll pull up again our pictures. What we were saying before is, since when Reuven died, Yael couldn't marry Shimon, right? Reuven dies here. Yael can't marry Shimon because he's married to Chana. So therefore, even when she marries Levi and Chana is dead, it doesn't make a difference. That's because Nefila Rishona, the whole Nefila Rishona, meaning from the time, let's just assume there's a timeline. Let's say it took her a week from the time Reuven died until she married Levi. Okay. So now from that time, or we should say 3 months, because usually we wait 3 months. We'll get to that later. But so let's say 3 months passes and she does Yibum with Levi. That whole time she couldn't marry Hannah, right? That's the she could marry Shimon because of Hannah. That's the Nefila Rishonah. So therefore we said, right? Our Mishnah basically says, so since she could, she marries Levi and only later does Hannah die, that's why she can't ever marry Shimon. But what if in that 3-month period, let's say, whatever time period it is, before she does Yibum with Levi, Hannah dies. Let's say Reuven dies. A week later, Hannah dies. Now, it's true the moment of Yibum, she couldn't marry Shimon, but within the Nefila Rishonah, that whole time period that she still hadn't done Yibum on account of Reuven, Hannah died. So she could have theoretically married Shimon. So maybe we don't allow Yibum with Shimon then, but maybe when Levi dies later, you might have thought, you could have inferred from our Mishnah, that if Levi dies and Shimon and Hannah died before Levi even did Yibum, and part of the Nefila Rishonah, that's what it says here. Right? From our Mishnah, you would have said, right, the whole Nefila Rishonah, the whole time period until she did her first Yibum from Reuven, Hannah was alive. But maybe she would be permitted if Hannah died sometime before, right, while she was still doing Yibum for Reuven. Maybe it wouldn't have been allowed. Kamash Malan comes, Rabbi Yehuda Amar and says, no, it's about the moment you fall to Yibum. It's not the whole Nefila Rishonah. It has to be Yevamot Yavo Aleh, the second her husband dies. And since that wasn't the case, right? And that you couldn't have derived from our Mishnah, that's what Rabbi Yehuda needs to tell us. Well, that's all nice and good, except there's another explicit Mishnah that states exactly that. So you can't really say that that's what Rav was adding because there's another Mishnah that says exactly that. So here goes. Hanami Tanina, that was also taught. Now this is a Mishnah Daf Lamed Bet we're going to see soon. So now it's 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So now again, Reuven dies. And then before Shimon does Yibum, he can't do Yibum, right? Because he's married to her sister. But then his wife dies. Okay? So that's exactly the case we just described with Rav. The wife dies before Yibum was done, basically. So here it tells you, it's the moment of Yibum, falling to Yibum that matters. If she dies down the road, right, she can't marry Shimon. So they said, no. You can't learn it from there either. That case is different because what's the main difference between these 2 cases? In our case, there were 3 brothers and one of them she could do Yibum with. And in that case, there were 2 brothers and there was only one for her to do Yibum with because one died and only one was left. And in that case, she was entirely out of the ball game of Yibum, right? It would be crazy, actually, in that case, to basically say once the sister died, she could do Yibum, because the second her husband died, she couldn't marry Shimon. She could go marry anyone she wants. It would be weird then if we undid that 3 weeks later when his wife dies. So comes the Gemara and it says that case is different. There she's rejected from Yibum entirely. And that's why she can never, ever marry Shimon. But in our case, she's not rejected from his house entirely because there's Levi. She can do Yibum with Levi. So so again, if Reuven were to die and then Hannah dies before she does Yibum, maybe since she can do Yibum with Levi and she wasn't rejected from Yibum entirely, you would think that he could actually go back and end up marrying. When Levi dies, she could actually marry Shimon because his wife had died already before she even did Reuven's Yibum. Kamash Malan, that's why Rav has to come and tell you. You couldn't have learned it from our Mishnah. You couldn't have learned it from Lamed Bet. That's why I'm telling you this halacha. No, it never works. If she fell to Yibum to Shimon, and at that moment he was married to the sister, it doesn't matter what happens a minute later, 10 minutes later, 3 weeks later, 5 years later, it doesn't make a difference. She can never marry Shimon. Okay, next case. Shlosha achim. Okay, again, we're back to the exact same thing. 3 brothers. 2 of them are married to sisters, right? And one is married to a different woman, not a sister. Now, we're going to have a big issue here about the order. Okay, that's going to be a big discussion. Now, before anyone dies, Reuven divorces Yael. And then, now, then what happens? Umeit nasoy nochrit. Levi, who's married to Shula, now dies. Shula falls yibum to Reuven. And, right, Knasaha Megaresh, the one who divorced his wife, Reuven divorced Yael, now marries Shula. Now, were these women sarot? No, because he was already divorced Yael. Zoe Shambru. Now, this line is going to cause us a lot of headache. This is the case where they said, V'kulan shemetu onit garshut sarotehem mutarot. This is the case where they say that, remember the first Mishnah? If the wives, the erva person, remember, Yael's our erva problem. If she dies or is divorced, then her tzara will be permitted to Shimon. Okay? And this is the case in which they say it. So if Reuven dies, Shula is permitted to do Yibum with Shimon. Okay? Now what's the issue here? So now they say, Tama digeresh v'achar kach met. Right? This whole order was, first he divorced her, then Levi died. Now, the inference is going to be, and this is going to be the inference I told you from the beginning, Rav Ashi's inference about Zika. Avamet v'achar kach geresh asura. It sounds like only if it happened in this order, because that's the order they gave. But what if Levi died? Then before, remember, now what happens when Levi dies? We're going to have to assume Zika. Shula has Zika to Reuven. Now, this case wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah, because obviously in this case, again, obviously, this is what the Gemara is inferring. Why is it not mentioned? Because in this case, Shula is going to be actually exempt. She's going to be considered a co-wife of Yael. So if first Levi died, then Yael got divorced from Reuven, and then Reuven did Yibum with Shula, Shula would be exempt, okay? She wouldn't have to do Yibum, okay? Then Reuven dies, Shula is prohibited to do Yibum, she'd be Asura. Now, what does this obviously show? That there's Zika, because they were never actually married to him at the same time. It was just that Shula fell to Yibum, so that meant, right, there was Zika. So Tama de Geresh v'achar kach met. Avamet v'achar kach geresh asura, and therefore Amar Rav Ashi, Zot omeret yesh Zika afilu b'trei ache. Comes Rav Ashi and says, this shows there's Zika even when there's two brothers, right? Because it wasn't just, right, there was more than one brother here. And yet you see, because Shula could have married Reuven or Shimon. And yet we still say there's Zika, and she's considered a co-wife of Yael, even though they were never married at the same time, because Yael got divorced before she did Yibum. So that clearly shows Zika. So now we're going to have a problem. Ula Rav Ashi, Kasher Rav Nachman. What happened to Mishnah number 1? Where we said it specifically said Ma'amal, because without Ma'amar, Zika is not enough, because ain't Zika. So how are we going to explain that? Amar L'cha Rav Ashi could say, Hu adin da'af agav delo aviba ma'amar nochri mechachatza chiyubu meyomi yabma. So he says, don't worry about that. The Mishnah said asaba ma'amar. It's even if lo asaba ma'amar. Even just Zika would be enough. Okay, remember, what was the case? That he marries, right? So again, what happened here? He does ma'amar and then he dies. Then the Nochri has to do chalitza because there was ma'amar, there was a connection between them enough to say, right, that she's the tzara of the erva, she can't do yibum. Okay, not fully, but it's enough to say something. So Zika would also be enough according to Rav Ashi. Now, why doesn't it mention Zika? That's what you always have to explain, even though it said that. Well, had katani ma'amar lafuki mi beit Shammai de'amar ma'amar kotne kinyan gamur kamash malan. We go back to yesterday's daf. Why did it say asaba ma'amar? You do chalitza. It's not to say you can't do yibum. It's to say we don't hold like Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai holds if you did ma'amar, what would they say? Kinyan gamor. If it's kinyan gamor, she's a full tzara, which means if she's a full tzara, she's exempt from yibum. There's 3 possibilities. Either she can do yibum, she can't do yibum, or she has to do chalitza. We pick the middle, right? The middle is to, first we thought it was to say she has to do chalitza, meaning she can't do yibum. Now we're saying she has to do chalitza, she's not exempt from yibum, okay? So basically it's a matter of where you look at it and what your perspective is and why they brought up the case of Ma'amal. So Rav Ashi now explained that. Now we're left with Rav Nachman Kasha de Rav Ashi. Now we have to do the reverse. Rav Nachman said from Mishnah number 1 today, we're going to infer Yesh Zika, but from Ein Zika. From our Mishnah, it sounds clear Yesh Zika, because otherwise our Mishnah wouldn't, right? Again, now why? It's all because of, we infer that the order is what's important, right? When the Mishnah said, first he divorced her, then Levi died, that must be because if Levi had died and then he divorced her, there would be Zika and they would be considered Sarot. So V'chi tema, so hu adin afilu met b'achar kach geresh, tzarata muteret. So why don't we just say that the Mishnah gave that case, but for all intents and purposes, it could have given the other case. Again, what's the other case, right? It could have been even if first Levi died and then they got divorced, right? So if Levi died and then they got divorced after, and then Shula married, if we hold Ein Zika, then again, they wouldn't be co-wives. And the Mishnah maybe included that, even though it didn't say that, it would have meant that also. Well, what's the problem though? Ela Zoe lemiutemai. Zoe basically says this case and not any other case. So Zoe must be coming to exclude something. So what could it be coming to exclude? We have an answer for that. There's three options, right? We had two options till now. Our first option was first she dies. First she gets divorced, then he dies, right? Now, then he dies. So now, and then there's Zika, but it doesn't matter because she's already out of the picture. Then we said, even if there's Zika, because we hold Ein Zika, because we're now in Rav Nachman, Ein Zika. So as long as Shula hasn't married before the divorce happens, hasn't done the Yibum, they're not co-wives. So what is Zoe coming to exclude then? There's a third case. What if he marries her and they're married? All three of them are married together, right? We have Reuven is married to both Yael and Shula. And then he divorces Yael before Reuven dies, before his death. That would be the case where we don't say what we just said. In other words, then if they were co-wives completely, okay, as opposed to, right, somewhat, right, semi, before Zika or not, right? If they were co-wives completely, then we're going to call them co-wives, okay? Then we're going to say, right, in that case, we're going to basically say that Sarah is exempt, okay? As opposed to here, where the Mishnah said, Sarotehem mutarot. What's the problem with this? The problem is Mishnah number 1, okay? Let's go back to Daf Bet. On Bet Amud Bet, the Mishnah gave, if you remember, the Mishnah gave this example of, said, V'kulam metu omianu onit garshu onim tzuai. If the tzara, if we move the erva woman, not the tzara, the erva woman out of the picture because she died, got divorced, something, right? She did miyun or whatever. I'm not going to get into all the other cases. Then they're tzarotehen or mutarot. And according to that Mishnah, right? According to now, we said that's all if they did it before he actually married her, the tzara. Here in this Mishnah, it was very clear, and it said it. Let me just find it. Right. Haita bito. They say, how does that work? If bito, they're fully married. Umate, okay, or got divorced. Kishem shebito ptura, kach sarata ptura. But achat bito, and you say that, sorry, that's not what I wanted to read. Ketzadim metu, tzaroteim mutarot. Sorry, the very end of the Mishnah. Haita bito, hamikol arayot elu nisuot lachiv, v'lo isha acheret. Meta bito nitgarsha, v'achar kach met achiv. They were married, and as long as they got divorced before the husband died, it would work. Our Mishnah, right, we just explained, Rav Nachman, if she married her, right, as long as she was divorced before the marriage, then the tzara is mutal. But it all has to do, if they were married at the same time, it's obviously going to be a problem. This says they could be married as long as, what's the important moment? According to what we're reading now, the important moment was when Shula married Reuven, was he married to Yael? According to the first Mishnah, it's when Reuven died, was he married to both of them? If the erva left the picture anytime before he died, the tzara is exempt. That's not at all what we're saying here. So, we can explain that Mishnah. They kind of, without telling you that they're comparing the first Mishnah, they're actually quoting an entire sugya. We already learned this whole sugya on Daf Yomi. You might not remember because we've learned a lot since then, and these Gemaras are quite complicated. But the Gemara says, if you say like Rabbi Yirmiyah Amal Tavra, Misha Shanazo, Lo Shanazo, the author of that Mishnah is not the same as the author of this Mishnah. They're two different opinions. And what's the difference of opinion? It's very clear. Hai Tana Sever Mitama Pelet. That Tana says, it's all the moment of death that determines were they tzarot at that time or not. That's what's going to determine. The high Tana and our Tana Savar, nisuin arishonim mipilim. It's the first marriage that's the most important, right? It's when, not the first marriage, it's when Shula marries. The moment of marriage. Was Yael in the picture or was she already out of the picture? That's what determines. And then you answer very simply, two approaches, right? Don't worry about contradiction. They're two different Tanaim. And then in our Mishnah, you would say, Zoe Lemute Kanasu Levasof Geresh, which according to the first Mishnah would be included in the Tzaraz P'tura. According to this, no. If when Shula got married, Yael was still in the picture, that would be the case that our Mishnah is exempted. You understand, the whole problem comes from the word Zoe. Zoe means this and not something else. There has to be some other case. Okay, and that's why we assume our Tana holds differently from that one. But Ela isavar la kirava de amar la olam chad tanu. But if you hold like Rava, who said it's all the same, and then zo ve'ein sarich lomar zo katane, then Zoe lemiute mai. The Zoe doesn't make any sense according to Rava, because Rava basically said our Mishnah really isn't necessary. Once you have that first Mishnah, you can infer our Mishnah, because if she died, if they weren't sarot at the time of the death. Here in our case, they weren't even sarot at the time of the marriage. So of course they're not sarot. And of course the sarot mutarot. In which case, that's how Rava understands it. That's just, our Mishnah is just an unnecessary case, but it's telling you anyway. Well then, Zoe is not lemiute anything because all the cases are excluded. And that's all the cases are included. There is no case that's excluded. Every single option is, as long as she dies at some point or divorces at some point, she's out of the picture in the tzaraz muteret. So, al korcha ke Rabbi Yirmiyah spirale. That's Rava, right? The Zoe, we're stuck basically. It sounds much more like Rabbi Yirmiyah, who said there's two different opinions here. So now they're going to say Ula Rabbi Yirmiyah, okay? And that's basically, you'd have to say this is all within Rav Nachman, who holds Ein Zika. If you hold Ein Zika, you're going to have to say Rav Nachman's going to have to hold like Rabbi Yirmiyah because we can't explain it like that. It's all the same. Now. L'Rava, Hani Chayisavar la Karavashi. So now we just said that Rava and Rav Nachman don't work together because if you hold Ein Zika, then you have no other way to explain. But Rava, it makes sense if he holds like Ravashi. Why? Because again, what did Rav Nachman, who held Ein Zika, basically all the cases, she's not going to be, right? The tzarazo is going to be muteret. But Rav Ashi, who said Zoe lemiute mate below geresh, right? And that's if he holds like Rav Ashi, you can say Zoe is lema'et, the case of meit b'achar kach geresh. Remember, according to Rav Ashi, we have a whole different approach here. It's only this case and not the next stage, right? Even stage number 2 wouldn't matter, for sure not stage number 3. And then isavar like Rav Nachman, though, but Rava, we're going to basically show can't hold like Rav Nachman because Zoe lemute mai, because then there's no Zoe lemute. It's basically the reverse of the case we just did. We said Rav Nachman can't work in with Rava, and now we're going to say Rava can't work in with Rav Nachman. So therefore, Ma'al korcha ki Rav Ashi spirale. So you'd have to say that Rava holds like Rav Ashi. The issue is Zika, in which case only if first he divorces her and then he dies. Once there's Zika, the tzara is going to basically be considered the co-wife. Okay, and then you'd have to say according to them, Misha shanazo lo shanazo. This Mishnah clearly contradicts the other Mishnah, and they must be two different opinions. Okay, a little bit farther. New Mishnah. Kulan shayu ben kiddushin o gerushin b'safek. You have a suffix whether you're married to someone or suffix whether you're divorced to someone. Now, this someone is your erva. So now we don't know, are you married to her or not married? Are you divorced or not divorced? Obviously, each one is going to have effects. Are you married or you're not married? Okay, so the tzarot, because it's suffix, we make the tzarot do chalitza, not yibum, right? Because if you're still married to the erva, then basically the tzara is going to be exempt. If you're not married to the erva, the tzara can even do yibum. So we do a compromise, be on the safe side, do chalitza. Ketzat safek kiddushin. What is such a thing as safek kiddushin? Zarak la kiddushin, safek karov lo, safek karov la. He throws her the ring, let's say. Okay, you can be kiddushin b'shtar, or he throws her the document, and we're not sure, is it still within his domain or her domain? Okay, you can like throw something in people's domain. Remember, we learned in Shabbat, 4 amot is your own domain. So you can throw it into her space. But what if it's closer to his space than her space? And we don't know which one. That's classic safek kiddushin. Zeo safek kiddushin. Safek gerushin. Now you would expect to say the same thing here. Like he throws her the get and it's not clear if it got into her reshut, but that's not what they say. And it's going to be the Gemara's first question. Why didn't they say that? So now what's safek gerushin? These are all cases where the get is valid on a Doraita level, but the rabbi said no. So, and I'm not going to get into why this is, we'll get to all this in Gitin. Katav b'ktav yado ve'en alav edim. It's written with his own handwriting, but there's no witnesses. So because there's no handwriting, it seems pretty clear it's his get, but there's no witnesses, so it's a problem. V'yesh alav edim ve'en bozman. The Rabbis Institute, you have to write a date so that we don't get, someone claims, oh, we were really married and mamzerim and all that. So you have to have a date. It didn't have a date, even though it had witnesses. Yesh bozman ve'en bo ela ed echad. It had a date and it only had one witness. So all those cases, zehu safek gerushin. So now the Gemara says, "Ilu b'gerushin safek karov la safek karov lo katani." When it comes to gerushin, safek karov lo. Why didn't it say that case where he throws her the get and it's unclear whether it got into possession or not? My timer, amaraba isha zo b'chezkat heter lashuk omedet umisafek ataba lo osra al ta'asrenu misafek. Rabbi says, wait a minute. This woman is basically considered married because we don't know if she's divorced. So what's her chazaka? Where is she until we prove otherwise? She's married. If she's married, she basically is mutar to marry anyone else because she's erva to the person. The tzara then is tzarat erva. From safek, you're going to forbid her. Al ta'asrenu misafek. Okay, and that's why they didn't bring that case, because if we're not sure if the get got into her possession or not, for that reason, we're not going to allow her. In other words, let's just assume she's not married. So Armalo Abaye, you could say the same thing by Kiddushin. If we're not sure if she's married or not, right? So misafek atabalo osra. It's all a matter of your perspective. You say safek kiddushin, then what's her chazaka? Her chazaka is she's not married. If she's not married, then the tzara can do yibum because the tzara is not a tzara of erva. So at that point, the tzara could have done yibum. So basically, I don't understand your logic, Rabbi, because for the same reason, we could say the tzara shouldn't do yibum because the tzara should be allowed to do yibum because keep her in her safek of she could do yibum. To which he answers, hatam lechumra. That's just a chumra. We're going to say, for chumra's sake, we're not going to let her do yibum. To which they're going to say, hi chumra da'atili de kula. That's a chumra that's a dangerous chumra. Okay, and I'm going to stop here. We'll get into why it's a dangerous chumra tomorrow, but it's a whole interesting thing in and of itself. Sometimes you think to be machmir is a good thing, but sometimes if you're a machmir and you're stringent, it could cause you some other problem, some other halachic issue. So we'll start with this tomorrow in tomorrow's class. Have a great day, everyone.